You know that feeling when someone sends you an invitation and something inside you just sinks? Not because you dislike the person, not because you have somewhere else to be, but because the second you read those words, "You coming out tonight?" a quiet exhaustion moves through you like a wave. And you sit there, phone in hand, trying to figure out why the idea of going somewhere, being somewhere, with people who actually like you, feels like the hardest thing in the world. So you type back maybe, or I will try, and you already know what that means. It means no, and then comes the guilt. The small, sharp guilt of someone who knows they are declining, and, for a reason they cannot fully explain. You replay it in your head. You think about how you used to love this. You used to be the one making the plans, texting first, arriving early. There was a time when going out did not feel like preparing for battle. When did that change? And more importantly, why? Here is what nobody tells you. The exhaustion you feel is not social anxiety. It is not introversion. It is not depression, though it might borrow its language. What you are feeling is the specific fatigue of a person who has been performing for so long that the mere idea of stepping onto a stage one more time feels like a betrayal of something fragile inside you. You are not afraid of people. You are afraid of who you have to become to be around them. This is the part worth slowing down on. Because there is a version of you that exists in social spaces, a version that is warm, put together, engaged, funny at the right moments, appropriately unbothered. Never too much, never too little. A version that laughs at the right times. That keeps the conversation moving. That asks questions and remembers answers and performs the kind of presence that makes other people feel like the evening was worth it. And you are good at it. That is the strange part. You are very, very good at it. But somewhere along the way, good at it stopped meaning enjoyable. Somewhere, the performance became indistinguishable from the exhaustion. And now, even before you walk through the door, your nervous system has already started tallying the cost. Carl Jung called it the persona, not a mask in the hollow, deceptive sense, but a psychological structure, a social architecture you build over years, brick by brick, specifically designed to help you navigate a world that rewards certain kinds of presence and quietly punishes others. Your persona was never a lie. It was a strategy. It was built in rooms where you learned that being too much made people uncomfortable, or that being too little made you invisible. You learned, early and precisely, what version of you the room needed, and you delivered. Every time, without being asked. Because the cost of not delivering felt higher than the cost of the performance itself. That is the origin. Not a character flaw, not weakness. A survival instinct so refined it became automatic. And now, years later, your nervous system has made a calculation. It knows that going out means activating the persona. It knows the persona requires energy, not physical energy, but the deep, architectural energy of someone who has to hold a specific shape for hours at a time. And some nights, the reserve is empty. Some nights, there is simply nothing left to give to the performance. So the body says no before the mind has even formed the thought. This is what psychologists call social depletion, but that term barely scratches the surface of what is actually happening. What is actually happening is more intimate than that. You are standing at the edge of a room you know you can enter. You know the words. You know the moves. You know how to make them feel at ease. How to carry the silence when it gets heavy. How to deflect questions that cut too close. How to be present without being exposed. And that knowledge, that competence, is the very thing making you exhausted. Because competence without authenticity is the loneliest kind of skill to have. Think about it this way. Imagine you are a musician. You have played the same concert for years. You know every note, every pause, every place where the audience always responds in the same way. And one night, you are standing backstage. The music is ready. The audience is waiting. And instead of excitement, you feel a hollow, specific dread. Not because you cannot play, because you have played it so many times that the music no longer sounds like music to you. It sounds like obligation dressed in a beautiful coat. That is what social spaces start to feel like when the persona has been running the show for too long. The coat is still beautiful, but it belongs to someone else. Now here is where it gets deeper, because this is not just about being tired. There is something else living underneath the avoidance. Something that does not announce itself clearly, but moves through you every time you cancel plans and feel, underneath the relief, a quiet grief. You miss something. You just are not sure what. You miss the version of an evening that exists in your imagination where you arrive and feel genuinely light, where the conversation flows and you do not have to manage it, where you laugh and it comes from somewhere real, not from the part of you that knows laughing makes people comfortable, where you can be quiet without anyone reading it as a problem, where your presence does not require constant maintenance. You miss connection, real connection, the kind that does not cost anything. And the tragedy is this: you have been so busy perfecting the performance that you have forgotten it was supposed to be in service of connection, not a replacement for it. This is what Nietzsche was gesturing at when he spoke about the weight of the actor, the person who can inhabit any role, who is fluid and adaptable and socially brilliant. That person, Nietzsche argued, risks the deepest kind of self-loss, not because they are dishonest, but because in becoming everything for everyone, they may quietly lose the thread back to what they actually are. You have not lost yourself, but the thread has gotten very thin, and some part of you knows it, which is why going out stopped feeling like going somewhere and started feeling like going away from the only place where you do not have to perform. The quiet of your own room, the one space where the persona can rest. There is a term in psychology for what happens when you use all your social energy navigating surfaces instead of depths. It is called affective labor, the invisible, exhausting work of managing your emotions to produce a specific reaction in others. And here is the thing about affective labor that nobody warns you about. It does not register as work while you are doing it. You do not go home and think, I worked hard at that dinner. You go home and collapse and do not understand why. Because the labor was emotional, not physical. It does not leave sore muscles. It leaves a kind of numbness, a flatness, a desire to be completely alone and completely unstimulated until the internal battery finds its way back to something. And the world looks at that battery and says, what is wrong with you? Go out. Live your life. Stop overthinking. But overthinking is not the problem. Overfeeling is. You feel everything in those rooms. Every shift in the energy. Every slight tension in someone's voice. Every moment where the conversation could go deep, but chooses to stay on the surface. You feel the gap between what people say and what they mean. You feel the performance in others, and it mirrors your own. And carrying all of that, all evening, while simultaneously managing your own presentation, that is not antisocial behavior. That is a nervous system that has been running at full capacity for so long it has started to protect itself. Stage 2. The armor. When the exhaustion becomes a pattern, something interesting happens. You start building defenses before you even need them. You begin declining before you have weighed the offer. The maybe comes automatically now. The excuses arrive pre-assembled, and you tell yourself it is self-care, it is boundaries, it is knowing your limits, and some of it is, genuinely, but some of it, and this is the part worth sitting with, is armor that has hardened past the point of usefulness. Because there is a difference between choosing rest and choosing invisibility. There is a difference between protecting your energy and slowly withdrawing from a life that once fed you. And the line between those two things is easier to cross than you think. You cross it quietly, in small increments, until one day you realize you have not been somewhere new in months. You have not met anyone new. You have not felt the particular electricity of a night that surprised you. The armor kept you safe, but it also kept everything else out. Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile, because they do not fit the image we are trying to project. And here is what lives in the shadow of a person who has stopped going out. The part that still wants to. The part that sees a photo of a crowded table full of laughing people and feels something. Not quite longing, not quite envy, but something adjacent to both. A recognition of a warmth you have been rationing yourself away from. You do not hate people. You love certain people with extraordinary depth. What you hate is the theater. What you miss is the intimacy. And the cruelest trick of social depletion is that it makes both feel like the same thing. It bundles the exhaustion of performance with the discomfort of presence. until you can no longer tell which one you are avoiding. You think you are avoiding the crowd. You are actually avoiding the vulnerability. Because to show up without the persona, to arrive somewhere as the version of you that is tired and uncertain and not entirely sure where the performance ends and the person begins, that is genuinely terrifying. Not in a dramatic way, in a slow, quiet way. The terror of being seen without armor. The fear that the real version, the one without the warmth dialed up and the edges smoothed down, might not be enough, might not be interesting enough, might not be lovable enough, might just be too much work to be around. That fear has a name. Psychologists call it vulnerability aversion. The deeply learned conviction that genuine exposure leads to rejection. That if people saw the unperformed version of you, the tired one, the uncertain one, the one that sometimes has nothing to say, they would quietly decide you are not worth the effort. And where did that conviction come from? It came from a room, probably a small one, a kitchen or a classroom or a family dinner table, where someone, not out of cruelty, but out of their own unexamined pain, communicated to you that your full self was too complicated to love simply. That the easier version, the agreeable version, the performing version, got more warmth, more approval, more safety, and a young mind absorbing that information made the most logical decision available to it. It became a very good performer. You were not broken. You were adaptive. But adaptation designed for one environment does not always survive the migration to another. The strategy that kept you safe in that small room is the same strategy now costing you genuine connection. The persona that earned you love is the same persona making you feel unseen. Because people can feel it, on some level. They cannot name it, but they can feel it. There is a warmth in you they can access and a depth in you they cannot. And some of them, the perceptive ones, try to reach past the performance, and you redirect them. Skillfully, gently, so gently they almost do not notice. But you notice. You notice the moment you deflected. You notice the question you turned into a joke. You notice the silence you filled with something easy instead of something real. And you go home carrying not just the exhaustion of performing, but the specific ache of someone who was offered connection and chose safety instead. Stage 3. The reckoning. Here's the shift that changes everything. The problem is not that you have a persona. Every human being has one. It is not weakness, and it is not deception. It is the necessary architecture of social life. Jung never argued for the abolition of the persona. He argued for the awareness of it. The goal is not to stop performing. The goal is to know when you are. Because when you know when you can feel the persona activating, can feel yourself slipping into the social shape that this room seems to require, you gain something you did not have before. You gain choice. Not the choice to always drop the armor. Sometimes the armor is appropriate. Sometimes the room genuinely calls for the performance. But sometimes in the right company, the right moment, you have the option to let the armor be a little softer. To answer honestly instead of cleverly. To admit that you are tired instead of performing energy you do not have. To sit in a silence and let it be real instead of filling it with something decorative. And what you will discover slowly is that the people worth keeping in your life, the ones who were always worth the cost of showing up, those people do not need the performance. They were never watching it the way you thought they were. They were watching for the moments it slipped, the moments you forgot to manage, the moments something genuine moved across your face before the persona caught it and corrected it. Those are the moments they found you. Not the polished version, the slipping one. This is the radical understanding the whole journey has been building toward. You have been optimizing for the wrong metric. You have been so focused on the quality of the performance that you miss the fact that the people who matter most were never there for the performance. They were there hoping the performance would eventually pause long enough for them to meet you. And your exhaustion, the very exhaustion that has been keeping you home, that has been making every invitation feel like a weight, that exhaustion is not a dysfunction. It is your interior self, the one that has been running the machinery of the persona for years without rest, finally sending a signal loud enough to hear. It is not saying, you are broken. It is saying, the current arrangement is unsustainable. It is saying, the cost of connection should not be the loss of self. It is saying something needs to change. Not the grand, seismic change of becoming a different person, but the quiet, daily change of small permissions. Permission to arrive somewhere without being in full performance mode. Permission to say, "I'm actually tired tonight," to someone who loves you, and trust that they will love you anyway. Permission to let a conversation be uneven, unpolished, real. Permission to be in a room and take up your actual amount of space, rather than the amount of space that makes everyone else comfortable. Permission, most radically of all, to go home early. Not because you are afraid, but because you are full. Because you got something real from the hour you were there. Because genuine presence, even in small doses, turns out to be more sustaining than hours of perfect performance. And this is where the mirror turns. Because you picked this video for a reason. You recognized something in the title, something in the words "performance you can no longer give," landed somewhere specific in you. And that recognition, that quiet, precise recognition, is not a symptom of something wrong with you. It is evidence of an extraordinary interior life that has outgrown the structures you built to protect it. You are not someone who hates people. You are someone who loves people so specifically, so deeply, so uncasually that casual connection has started to feel like a bad trade. You are not antisocial. You are post-performance. You are at the exact edge of a transition that many people never reach. The transition from performing connection to choosing it. From going out because you should to going out because something in you genuinely wants to. From building relationships on the foundation of your best impression to building them on the foundation of your honest presence. That transition is not comfortable. It does not happen in one evening. It does not arrive because you made a decision. It arrives because, slowly, you start giving yourself small permissions. And those permissions compound. And one day, you show up somewhere, tired, a little uncertain, without the full armor, and someone meets you there. Not the performance. You. And it will feel different from anything the performance ever earned you. Because it will be real. Not the warmth you generated. The warmth that came back. And you will understand, probably for the first time, that you were never too much. You were just performing in rooms too small to hold all of you. The exhaustion was never the enemy. It was the invitation. Which truth landed hardest for you? The moment you recognized the persona, the cost of effective labor, or the realization that the people who matter were never watching the performance in the first place? Sit with that answer. Because in the next exploration, we go even deeper into why the people who are best at performing connection are often the ones who have never truly felt it.